You found why we are Christians. My name is Kent Philpott, and we are interviewing somebody in Indianapolis, Indiana, via Skype. His name is Joseph W. Bergeron, and otherwise known as Dr. Joe Bergeron. And welcome, Joe.
Great to be with you.
We finally got the sound right. Everything's good. We're going. We're doing it. And I'm going to start by reading from your book, The Crucifixion of Jesus. Little section about the author. Here it is. Joseph W. Bergeron, MD, has been a practicing physician for over 25 years. He has authored peer-reviewed journal articles on the death and resurrection of Jesus. His particular area of interest is in the medical aspects of Christ's death and the disciples' belief in his resurrection. He also volunteers with Ratio Christi Campus Apologetics Alliance. Well, all right, Joe, where were you born?
I was born in Glendale, California.
All right.
Grew up in Los Angeles.
Yeah, right. And we have a connection. We went to the same high school.
Yes, imagine that.
Of all things, Verdugo Hills High School, northern part of LA, just at the head of the San Fernando Valley. And what year did you graduate, Joe?
76.
76. Well, I graduated in 59. Now, so did you engage in any sports while you were at Verdugo Hills?
No, I was always fat and clumsy. I was the person nobody wanted on their team.
I was skinny and clumsy, but I managed to play a little bit. And what kind of stuff did you enjoy about Verdugo Hills High School?
Oh, I don't know. It's just a nice location. I had a lot of good friends there. Most of my friends were Jewish. I was telling your wife.
Oddly, Joe, mine were too. It was half a Jewish community, Salentahunga. So you graduated from Verdugo Hills, and what happened after that?
Well, I went to college for a little bit, but I didn't really feel connected or, had a drive at that time. I went off to Bible school. Actually to Kenneth Hagin's Bible School in 1978.
You went off to a Bible school?
Yes, sir.
I remember Kenneth Hagin.
Yes.
I remember. He had a television program, I think, too.
Well, I worked for him. I knew him, his family, knew them all well. And, when you're a young person, you detect any nuance of phoniness real quickly. And he and his wife were just wonderful people. It was an important and special time in my life. And then after that, I went into ministry and associate pastor in Southern California. And my interest was really in missionary work, so I did missionary evangelism, mostly in southern India. And I've been to India many times. My wife is from India. And so that interest is something that I've retained throughout my professional life, the desire to share the gospel and express the gospel. After a few years in my later 20s, I thought, well, I'll go back to school. I didn't even really know whether I could succeed in school. I hadn't done much in college, but I ended up doing okay and got into medical school. And I thought I might do medical missionary work. And I've done some of that in short-term venues, but I had a couple of kids, and my oldest child has Down syndrome and autism, and then you start thinking about his needs and the educational concerns of the second child. So I didn't find a good fit for a long-term missionary setting. So I've been working in the United States and volunteering and doing short-term things as they presented to me. How I got into writing about the crucifixion is kind of an odd story. I had set up lectures for a missionary surgeon at Indiana University for the Christian medical student group, they knew I was a believer, so they asked me to speak one day, and I didn't know what to talk about. I just, a lot of those talks are about ethics and, be a good doctor because it's the right thing to do and that sort of thing. But, I don't have that kind of educational background. And so I thought, well, I knew doctors had written about the crucifixion. So I thought, I'll just review what they've written and I'll present it to the students. And as I got into that, one of the things that surprised me that I found perplexing was there was not an agreement among physicians about Jesus' cause of death. I found that very peculiar because in my work where I do have treated injured workers, personal injury cases, and done medical legal work, I don't have the option of saying I don't know what the answer is. I have to define the diagnosis, the mechanism of injury, the impairments with a reasonable degree of medical probability and accuracy. And so it just occurred to me that there must be a way to examine this and do essentially a forensic reconstruction of what happened to Jesus and make reasonable conclusions about what most likely occurred the day that he died. And I think that's what a lot of the book was about, and my first academic article, which was in a medical journal.
Now, Joe, tell us about your family.
Well, my parents and grandparents grew up in Los Angeles. I don't know what I'm doing in Indiana. I didn't know where Indiana was. But Dad was a school teacher, and Mom is a devoted Christian, and she made sure that we went to Sunday school at the local Methodist church, and I received the Lord at age 6 in a vacation Bible school.
Now say that again, Joe. You what?
I received the Lord at age 6 in a vacation Bible school in a small Methodist church in Los Angeles.
Okay. And you became a Christian at that point?
Yes. I mean, it was something that, and Charles Spurgeon said a 4-year-old could receive Christ if they're properly instructed. And I think that children can do that. And even as I matured in life and really wasn't going to church, if you asked me if I was a Christian, I would say yes, and I could point to that time in my life and say that was an event that occurred in my life and faith. And when I got into high school at Verdugo Hills, my sister started attending a Bible study that was run by charismatic people, which I didn't know anything about. But my mother, when she was a very young child, went to Angelus Temple sometimes and heard Sister McPherson speak. And so she knew that speaking in tongues was something that Christians did. So I didn't automatically think that these were weirdos. And I would listen and just kind of observe. But I started reading the Good News for Modern Man New Testament. And that was my entree back into an interest of spiritual things. And as I started reading through that, I thought, well, I'll just be baptized because that's the right next thing to do. And so I did that.
Now, where were you baptized, Joe, again?
It was a church in Long Beach, a charismatic church in Long Beach.
Okay.
And the unusual, and again, and they were very openly charismatic, and there wasn't the kind of stigma about that I think we see today. It was kind of commonplace that people, worshipped in that style and sang and prayed in tongues and those types of things. At least it seemed commonplace during that time, which I think would be, consistent with the Jesus movement or what Greg Laurie calls the Jesus Revolution or whatever you want to call it in those days. But when I was baptized in water, I had the very vivid experience that I also was baptized in the Holy Spirit at that time. I was age 15.
You've become a Christian, very, very definitely, baptized in water, baptized in the Holy Spirit. And how old are you at that point?
15.
You're 15 years old. Okay.
Yes. And really, it was the baptism of the Holy Spirit that was a life-changing experience for me.
Okay. Okay. I understand. It was for me too. I understand that, Joe. How did your parents react to that, or were they with you in that all of that?
Well, we were all attending church at that time, so there was not any kind of resistance within the family.
Okay.
In general acceptance. I I don't think that it's odd there. You know, that my dad didn't really want me to go to Bible school because he didn't think I had the personality to be a pastor or anything like that. And in retrospect, I think he's right. Was right.
Yeah.
Uh, that's not my gift. Um, so he wasn't real fond of me going off to Bible school, but I did that, and he didn't really object too much. But then when I went back to college to study biological sciences, my mother didn't really like that.
Yeah.
So, but at that point you're an adult and you've got to navigate for yourself, and I just had to follow what I believed I needed to do, and so, and they're still with me.
Okay.
Dad's passed on, but mom is proud of me, proud of the book.
All right. Good. Good, Joe. I went to med school at some point. What med school did you go to?
St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri.
Okay. All right. And after you graduated, did you start your own practice? Did you join another practice?
Well, in medical education, you go to undergraduate college for 4 years, you go to medical school for 4 years, you go to residency training for 3 to 5 years or more, depending on your specialty. It's a very long and arduous life. And so after St. Louis, I went into specialty training in my specialty, which I finished in Indianapolis, and which is commonplace for people to stay and live and work where they finish their education. And so that's how I ended up in Indiana.
Okay.
As I said, I didn't know where Indiana was.
So what was your specialty?
My specialty is physical medicine and rehabilitation. And a lot of people don't know what that is, but essentially we treat musculoskeletal and neuromuscular types of conditions over a broad spectrum of things. Some of us do hospital work. I've done that. I've also done primarily office-based work. And if I can make an analogy, it's something like non-operative orthopedics, non-operative neurosurgical things, treatment of those kinds of disorders, but not surgery. I don't do surgery.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Joe. Not that I understood it.
Well, but that's how it got me to writing the book, because
Yeah.
I've done legal analysis of many cases, and when I studied what physicians had written about the crucifixion, and I found that there was not a consensus, I thought that just doesn't make sense to me at all.
Yeah.
There's got to be reasonable conclusions that we can make, and in medical legal work, we talk about more likely than not, or a greater degree of medical certainty.
Your medical training, your specialty, set the stage for the book, The Crucifixion of Jesus. Now, let me get to a couple other things. You're married.
Yes.
And do you have any kids?
Yes, I have two children. One I said he's now age 20. He has Down syndrome and autism.
Oh, is that right? Down
Yeah.
syndrome? Yeah.
Yes. And he's nonverbal, but he's a delightful person. It's to get off subject. I can never understand why so many Down children are aborted, because he's added so much to our lives.
Yes.
Then my second child is 17.
17, okay.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your wife.
She's from southern India.
Southern India.
Southern India, yeah. And I met her and her family when I was doing missionary evangelism and going there frequently. I spoke in churches, I spoke in open air meetings and things like that.
I think you've said that you've been to India 15, 20 times.
I stopped counting, yeah. Lots of times.
Okay. And when you were doing that, it was medical mission work, pretty much?
No. It was missionary evangelism. I spoke in churches and did open air meetings and things like that, street preaching.
Okay. All right. And somehow you met her. What is her name?
Magdalene, like Mary Magdalene.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. I saw that name and I couldn't make sense of it. Magdalene. Okay. That's her name.
Yeah.
Was she brought up Hindu?
No. Her father was Hindu. Her mother was Catholic and raised in a convent, and then actually, and that's not uncommon, at least in that time. And then they converted and became evangelical and charismatic.
So, okay, how does she like living back here in the United States?
Oh, that's a mixed bag. I think there's a lot of things she misses about her home and culture, and there's a lot
Yeah,
of things she likes here.
yeah,
Um, yeah, that's a tough one.
that's a
So,
tough one. Okay, Joe.
a lot of people think, people want to, jump the border and get here, and I understand that. Uh, and life here, even the negative parts of it, is better than most places in the world.
Sure.
But there are cultural things that you miss, and family and social things that just aren't the same. And our children are not Indian, and they're not going to be Indian.
All right.
They're very American, and
All
so
right, Joe.
it's a big change and maybe a shock in a lot of ways.
Okay. You like the area?
Well, you finish your training, you have friends, you learn how medical things work in the community, learn things, statutory things about how treating injured workers, and which is a lot of what I did. It's different from state to state, and so and the malpractice environment here is favorable to physicians. It just seemed like a good place, and it's the Midwest. It's a decent place to raise a family. It just seemed like a reasonable decision to make, but I don't like the winter.
I think I've been to Indiana maybe one time, probably drove through it. I remember nothing, but I've heard just wonderful things. If the twisters and cyclones and tornadoes don't get you,
True, we have them.
you have them. Okay. So now, with your background here, let me just say, in Indianapolis, do you have a church that you go to?
Yes,
Okay, tell us a little bit about that church.
it's a community church,
A community church.
which means it's non-denominational. I guess if anything, it might have more of a Methodist flavor. That's the educational background of the pastoral staff. They are not charismatic. They're not going to talk about it, but they're nice people.
Okay, they're good people. All right.
And really, the youth group has been is one of the strong aspects of the church, and has done a lot for my second child. So I feel indebted to them for that, and they're good people.
Okay. Are you able to take your son who has Down syndrome? Does he attend with you?
Oh yeah, always.
Always.
If I go, he goes.
He goes. Okay. All right. All right, Joe. So now, I want to spend most of the time in the next program about your book, which I consider to be a very important book, and so I'm going to reserve that for then. I'd like you to talk about your Christian experience now. You're older in the faith. You were converted at 15. What is it like? What has it been like being a Christian and growing up into Christ? Your personal experience about what that's been like. The good times, the bad times, Joe.
I think about that a lot, or have, and I guess I would say that I regret every minute that I wasn't fully committed to the dissemination of the gospel, that I wasn't fully committed to helping, assisting in gospel work, doing everything I could, because it has not always been a priority for me. And when I went to medical school, and I told you it was a 12-year process, I feel like I entered a time capsule, because you lose control.
I can
of your
understand that. I can understand that, Joe. Yeah.
life. You lose control of it. I mean, your life is consumed by all of that. And then, I emerged, and, after having children and then starting to grow, you start thinking, well, we need to be active in church and develop that renewed interest. And I guess I would say that my biggest regret is not being 100% committed 100% of the time.
Right.
Um, I think I am now. At least that's my goal, to be that way. And so that's why, uh, my passion has been, and worked on the book for years, uh, because I want to spread the gospel in a way that maybe I can add something to the gospel narrative in modern times. You know, everybody has their position in life and their gift, and maybe somebody can do inner city work, and somebody, can work in a foreign country. And my intent was to write to the college student, college graduate who are so at risk for leaving their faith, that that's what compelled me to go through that study. And years took. Each of the articles I wrote took 2 years to write, and then the book after that.
Okay.
And so, in terms of my intent and commitment now, it's really about doing everything I can to influence people for the truth of the gospel.
Okay.
And so that's why I'm here with you.
You are an evangelical like I am, and when we say evangelical, we don't mean that in a political sense. We mean
No.
that in the biblical sense.
Yes.
Go and make disciples.
Yeah, and I'm not Billy Graham. I'm not going to be like him, and I can't be like anybody other than who I am. But what I can do, I want to do to the fullest. And so that's why I'm here with you. I'm going to go lecture in Utah for the Radio Christi, a couple of Radio Christi groups in the spring. I speak in churches. I've spoken at the medical school several times. Any place that I can speak and try to influence people for the truth of the gospel. That's what I'm interested in now, and talking about the book, not because I care
Right.
about the book so much as the message.
Wonderful book, and we'll be spending most of the time next on this. I was glad that you were able to look back on your Christian experience and growing up, because so many of us have our ups and downs, our times of strong commitment, other times not so much, which is typical and normal. How would you define your theological position? Do you have terms that you would use that say, okay, Joe, you're a Christian, but what kind of a Christian are you? How would you express that or answer that?
Oh, that's a hard one. Probably because I'm not an academic theologian, so
Okay.
I'm not sure what the right terms are. I would describe myself as evangelical. To me, evangelical is kind of a wastebasket term, but I think it means that those of us in that wastebasket think that it's imperative that you make a decision.
Right.
You have to make a decision for Christ, and that's what I said in the epilogue of my book. I tried to make that clear and easy for people to understand, that making a decision to receive Christ's forgiveness is imperative.
Okay.
I would describe myself as a charismatic. I believe in the vibrancy of the Holy Spirit's presence in the life of the believer.
Okay, good.
And that's not real popular anymore, like when we were young. But it's still in the Bible, and it's not been done away with by anything that I can see.
True enough, Joe. I just remembered something. That you had an opportunity to meet Mother Teresa in India.
I did.
Tell us about that.
Well, I was in my travel there. I stopped in Calcutta for a couple of days, and I thought, well, I'll just go see Mother Teresa, see if I can. And I had seen Malcolm Muggeridge's documentary called Something Beautiful for God, and that's all I really knew about her. So I went there to where she lives, which is called the Mother House, which is a several-story building of it was unpainted cement, and I walked around to the door, and uh, the double wood doors, and there was a wood plaque on the side, uh, maybe 14 by 16 inches, and uh, it said Mother Teresa is, and then underneath it had in and out, and a little wood chip that they moved back and forth, whether she was there or not. And so it said she was in. So I pounded on the door, and the sister came to the door, and I said, I'm traveling through, and I'd like to meet Mother Teresa. And I don't know what she is. She thought another one of these, right? You know? And so she might have rolled her eyes, I'm not sure. She took me in and sat me on a cement bench about 6 feet long. And I sat there, and Mother Teresa walked out and sat down next to me and talked to me. She had an abrasion on her forehead. She had fallen. And that was in when was that, 1989. She had a pacemaker placed. She had a cardiac rhythm problem. So she was falling down. And thankfully they took care of that. It was a heart rhythm issue, apparently. But she sat there and talked to me, and she was very congenial. The interesting thing that you didn't get by looking at the documentary, that you got by sitting there and looking in her eyes, was that she was intensely intelligent and determined. Yet at the same time, she was, very congenial and friendly. And she took my hand and prayed for me. I prayed for her back. I wasn't Catholic. I don't know. I thought I was doing what I should do. She showed me around the compound. They had a chapel there, where the novices were trained and so forth. She told me to come back and work in India when I finished my work.
And you couldn't take a picture with her?
Well, I didn't, because in Malcolm Muggeridge's documentary, she said that she didn't like people taking pictures of her. And in fact, that there's a scene where someone wants to take a picture of her, and she takes the camera away from them, takes a picture of them, and hands the camera back and says, now you have a picture of yourself taken by Mother Teresa.
Joe, we got to come to the end of this program. I'm glad I remembered that Mother Teresa. All right. So we've finished the first of our programs with Joe Bergeron. Bergeron. Oh, well, close. But we've got another program coming, and we're going to be focusing on his book, The Crucifixion of Jesus. So be looking for that program on why we are Christians. So long.